Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Friday. Happy Friday, TGIF. So today's show is on a movie that about a month ago I realized I haven't done a video for this movie, and I was like, man, I gotta get my head out of my ass and talk about this movie because this movie is just incredible. When it comes to horror exploitation movies, gore soaked, demented uh, horror exploitation movies, this is one of the best. This is such a classic. And especially when it comes to Japanese cinema. The Japanese can do it right. That was past couple of years I started to really get into, and I have a pretty decent collection now of a lot of Asian, mostly Japanese horror exploitation movies. And some of those films are well, just fucking gonzo crazy. And this is one of them. This movie is an incredible movie. I did a show on this movie back when I was doing my Facebook Live videos, and I did a review of this movie. I have talked about this movie a lot, but I haven't done a show on this channel that I believe that I don't think so. If I did, I did, but I don't believe I have. And it's one of those movies when I was going through, you know, my when I got my shelving together around Christmas and I got everything set up, I was like, wait, I haven't talked about this movie, and this movie is like one of the greatest movies, especially in the horror exploitation world. It's like I gotta redo this. I gotta do this. And I realized too, I bought this movie almost 3 or 4 years ago, which is crazy. I've only watched it once, and I'm like, why? And that was my feeling. I watched it again last night, only for the second time, and I was just like, that's crazy because this is my jam. This movie was made for me, and I need to put this in my rotation. And that movie is the amazing Evil Dead Trap. This is a just a totally demented, gonzo crazy horror exploitation movie that came out in 1988, and it I bought this movie. Yeah, it came out in 1988, and it was directed by Toshiro Akita. There are the Evil Dead Trap is there. It is a franchise. Apparently, there's like I think there might be three or even four movies in this franchise. I have heard that the other films are not very good. I haven't seen any of those other movies, of course, but this movie is a fucking masterpiece. It's the only way I can describe it. It's completely insane. It's got so many elements. Um, it's a unique movie because this movie really takes influences from American horror films, but then also a lot of Italian horror films. And the thing that's interesting about this movie is it has like this kind of a Silence of the Lambs vibe to it, but then it's also like really influenced by like Lucio Fulci films, the Gates of Hell trilogy in particularly. I would say it's definitely greatly influenced by Lucio Fulci films, um, Hershey and Herschel Gordon Lewis. I've heard this movie talked about where it was really greatly influenced, and I see it really greatly influenced by one of his best movies, one of my favorite Herschel Gordon Lewis movies, The Wizard of Gore. This movie too, there is like a lot of things around this movie of where this was like one of the first kind of Japanese horror movies that was, not just influenced by its immediate culture, not just by other Japanese films, but by again Dario Gento, Lucio Fulci, John Carpenter. non-Asian directors, non-Asian films that that you can see the influence of a lot of those fantastic iconic directors in this movie, and as well as their movies. And essentially, this movie is about this serial killer, and it's about this camera crew that they that they have this TV show, and they're basically investigating these crimes. One of the members of this camera crew, of this TV crew, they get this video of apparently of someone being tortured and killed on video, and they take it upon themselves to kind of investigate this you know terrible thing, this atrocity, and they come across this super creepy like abandoned building that's like I think like an old factory building, and they get essentially picked off one by one when they go and they take it upon themselves to do this like their own investigation, and it's insane. This movie has such incredible atmosphere, super creepy, super creepy, and it definitely has like you see the Italian influence in this movie big time. And again, I kick myself for not seeing this movie more than I have. I've only seen this movie twice, and I'm like, again, like I said, this movie is like this was made for me. So, and Japanese cinema is incredible. There, I mean, it's massive, and there's so many great. Especially like I said, the last few years I've gotten exposed to a lot of really gonzo crazy Japanese exploitation movies, but this movie is kind of at its own level, and it really is like it is the only Japanese movie that I've seen that is really like you can see all of these other influences, like Italian, the Italian thing, like I said, it's greatly influenced by Mario Bava, one of the legendary actors, should say one of the legendary names in as a director in Italian exploitation cinema. Definitely Dario Argento, and I think big time Lucio Fulci, and I'd say a lot of Herschel Gordon Lewis, like I said, with Wizard of Gore being a big influence on this film. On this film, the way this film is lit too, like you can really see the Italian influence a lot. The visually, this movie is just stunning, and so it is a unique film that way. Like out of all of the Japanese films that I've been getting into in the exploitation world, this movie is unique because this is the only, when I think about it, it's the only Japanese film that I've seen that you can see a real big kind of Italian influence in it. So it's got a really unique thing to it. It's a real interesting blending of styles, and it definitely has that. It's definitely got like a Jonathan Demme, Silence of the Lambs vibe. Like this movie's very suspenseful. At its heart, it's about this serial killer, and it's a hunt for a serial killer who is this complete psychopath, and which so when you combine that with the Italian influence, it makes for such a unique movie, and but at the same time, and also I would say this movie is greatly influenced by David Cronenberg. Can't leave that out. Videodrome, I would say, would be one of the biggest influences. It's definitely body horror. This movie is super fucking gory. Um, yeah, the kills in this movie are just brutal as all hell. Some people would say, "Oh, this is kind of like a torture porn movie." There are people who, you know, you know, I could see that. I could see because there are scenes of people who get brutally killed and are essentially tortured to death. But the movie is so well done. Like the characters are, the script is so great. It's such a suspenseful movie. There the actors, the cast is phenomenal in this movie. There's the atmosphere is just amazing. The music is awesome. The actual killer in this movie is really menacing and frightening. And I think this movie is generally, I mean, this movie is shocking, but I think this movie is actually scary. I think it's legitimately scary. And it's a thriller as well. Because essentially it's a serial killer movie, but it has so many, so many influences, like so many different, you can see so many different influences, but it is really its own thing. It's such a unique movie, and the way it's kind of structured, the ending for this film is just like jaw dropping. There's literally a an exploding vagina monster. That's all I have to say about that. There and there's definitely, like, you really see the Cronenberg influence. I mean, it's big time. It's big time, and super creative kills, gory as hell. I just did a show with where I talked about this film Werewolves with Frank Grillo, and how I, which will be uploaded today as well. And I said that one of the things I said is that movie, there's no chemistry really with any of the characters. You don't really care about anybody. This movie is so polar opposite of that. Like, I immediately care and gravitate towards each character that's in this movie, and it's fantastic, beautiful. The cinematography is just awesome. The set design, the world design. Like, again, I always say my my biggest thing most of the time when I watch a horror movie is I really want, even if the movie, like, for all intents and purposes, kind of sucks, if it's got really good atmosphere where it feels like you could, like, you, like, it's been really lived in, or you could see yourself kind of living in it, like where it kind of gets under your skin, 9 times out of 10 I will probably like that movie. Even, if the atmosphere is really, really rich, that's for me a major, major selling point. And this movie is all about that. But on top of that, it's got all of those incredible elements. Just tight and meaningful suspense, great characters, a really great tight script, great chemistry, beautiful cinematography, brutal as fuck kills, a really great story, and it's totally gonzo. This movie is totally insane. Like, by the third or fourth act, you're just like, what? The other thing that's so cool about this movie is the first few acts, first 2 or 3 acts of this movie. I'd say it's like four movements of four acts to this film. The first half or more, or more of this movie, it's very much like grounded in reality. There isn't any, necessarily supernatural elements or otherworldly elements to this movie. It's very, very much grounded in reality. Kind of, well, when I think of it, kind of like how Longlegs was, with Nicolas Cage, where that movie, for the most part, was very much grounded in the hunt for Longlegs, the serial killer. But then it goes into a much different world where it introduces these, like, supernatural elements. And Evil Dead Trap definitely does that. Like, it really, again, the whole beginning and middle are, the story is essentially about this hunt for the serial killer, and it very much is grounded in this, like, reality. but then it does it changes so much, and I don't want to give away much about this movie. I have heard people talk about this movie. The way I originally heard about this movie was about 3 or 4 years ago after watching one of my favorite YouTube guys, Mood616, who's a Canadian YouTube guy who specializes in all things exploitation. He had talked about this movie, and I was just like, "What? This movie sounds insane." And I remember coming across shortly after hearing about this movie. I saw it at Bull Moose and I bought it, but I only watched it once, and I don't know why. But this movie definitely goes off the rails, but in a good way. By the third or fourth act, where you're like, "What?" There's this big plot reveal, and it's one of those things you truly don't see it coming, and it goes into full on Cronenberg territory, like full on, you know, body horror. Super gory, and it's just, yeah, it's batshit crazy, and I just love. It's got. I think this film has one of the greatest endings I've ever seen in a movie. It's just so fantastic. It's like when the Japanese can really dial in and set out to make a really good, fucked up, crazy, blood-soaked horror film. They knock it out of the park, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and this is an example of, a, a pure, um, the pure definition of a home run. Can't recommend this movie enough. It's it's an experience. It's really. I mean, I remember, watching it last night. I was just like, my jaw dropped, and I was just like, what the fuck, really? Like, that's insane. I've never seen that before. This edition is just spectacular. I mean, beautiful packaging. There's some good special features on here. There's a filmmaker historian about who talks a lot about Japanese cinema, really knowledgeable. That's very, very interesting. I wish there was more interviews with the actual filmmakers, but it's actually really great and informative. But this is a beautiful, beautiful transfer. This is a beautiful collection of this movie. This movie's a masterpiece. Just totally an amazing Gonzo experience. I can't recommend this movie enough. Do yourself a favor and see this movie, particularly if you can get the Blu-ray of this version, because it's a stunning transfer, and this movie is just an experience. It's one of the best. It might be. I mean, yeah, it's definitely one of the best, if not the best, Japanese horror exploitation movies I've ever seen. Yeah, just amazing. So I can't recommend it enough. Evil Dead Trap. It is the shit. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.